Having difficulty sleeping can be extremely frustrating, and it can have a really big impact on our lives. There are so many different strategies out there that can help you improve your sleep, and chances are that if you do struggle with your sleep, you've probably tried, if not all of them, then at least a lot of them. Well, if none of them have helped, maybe it's time to try a different approach. Metacognitive therapy offers some different perspectives and explanations of why we struggle to sleep, and it gives us some new insights on how we can help ourselves get a better night's sleep. In my daily work as a psychologist, I see countless people struggling with sleep difficulties. It's estimated that between 10 and 20% of the adult population actually have difficulty sleeping on a regular basis. And when I think of my clients who are primarily struggling with stress, anxiety, or depression, it's almost 100% of them that struggle with sleep in some capacity. That's because we see a really strong link between stress, anxiety, and depression and sleep difficulties. We know that a lack of sleep can worsen stress, anxiety, and depression, but at the same time, we also know that it's a symptom in itself. This means that we can get stuck in a self-perpetuating cycle of a lack of sleep and stress, anxiety, and depression that can be really difficult to break out of again. So let's look at how metacognitive therapy has a different approach to sleep than most other approaches. I do have a full video about metacognitive therapy that you can watch right here, and I'll also make sure to link it in the end card. Metacognitive therapy suggests that trying too hard to force yourself to go to sleep can actually have the complete opposite effect and make it much more difficult to fall asleep. Instead, metacognitive therapy suggests that we do much less to help ourselves go to sleep. So if you feel like you've tried everything to improve your sleep, maybe it's time to try to do nothing. I know it seems counterintuitive, but it actually works. And in this video, I'll show you why it works and how you can implement it to improve your sleep. Let's have a look at a real-life example of what the struggles of sleep can look like. I had a client called Matthew who was really struggling with his sleep. Matthew had struggled with his sleep for a long time, and he was really feeling that it had a big impact on his life. He experienced that it affected both his performance at work and his social interactions with others. When Matthew came to see me, he'd already tried a bunch of different things to try and sleep better. He'd worked on setting up a good sleep environment with no distractions, with good lighting, good temperature, and he'd implemented a sleep routine where he'd go to bed and wake up the same time every day. He'd also tried some strategies from cognitive behavioral therapy, such as challenging his negative thoughts and trying to reframe them into more realistic ones. Speaking to Matthew, it became clear that some of his sleep-related behaviors and beliefs were actually what was keeping him from sleeping. Matthew had heard of the risks of not getting enough sleep and strongly believed that he needed to get a solid 8 hours of sleep every night to be able to function the next day. This belief made him closely monitor his sleep patterns and thoughts. Whenever he'd be approaching an important work commitment, he'd monitor himself for sleepiness and fatigue throughout the day. And his thoughts and fears of not getting enough sleep would trigger a worry in him. He would think things like, what if I can't sleep tonight? Then I won't be able to concentrate at work tomorrow and I won't be able to perform at my best. At the point of these thoughts, he's already started to set him up for a bad night's sleep. He simply put too much pressure on the sleep situation. What Matthew also found was that sometimes he would cancel social activities to compensate for the lack of sleep through the night. He would tell himself that he needed to rest and relax and therefore had to cancel other activities. The problem with this is that now the lack of sleep is actually making him miss out on things that were important to him. The lack of sleep is impacting his whole life, and this just puts more pressure on the sleeping situation. So even though Matthew's been employing all these different strategies to help him get better sleep, he's not realized that what's actually keeping him awake are his worries and his thoughts about sleep, rather than the sleeplessness itself. You see, our attempts to control sleep has the paradoxical effect of perpetuating sleeplessness. And some of the explanation of this can be found when we misinterpret the reason for our sleeplessness. So in this example of Matthew, we see a lot of the common reasons of why people think they struggle to sleep. So let's look at some of the most common explanations of why we struggle to sleep. The one I tend to hear the most is that negative thoughts keep us awake. We can often have the feeling that as soon as our head hits the pillow, we get overwhelmed by a million thoughts that we get stuck in and we keep thinking over and over again. And that's what's keeping us awake. Worrying and ruminating at night can really help fuel the insomnia. It keeps our mind awake and alert, and it keeps fueling more intrusive thoughts. In metacognitive therapy, we'd call these type of thoughts trigger thoughts. These are thoughts that we have that we want to act on, we want to do something with, we want to engage, fix a problem, or find a solution, and that keeps us awake. Some other common explanations of why we struggle to go to sleep is when we have too much caffeine or too much screen time too close to the time when we want to go to sleep. Generally speaking, there's a lot of focus on sleep hygiene and how sleep hygiene is important to get a good night's sleep. You can find a lot of advice out there that will tell you that the environment you sleep in is crucial to the quality of sleep you get. This will typically focus on things like it has to be quiet, it has to be dark, it has to be calm, it has to be cool. And while these are all good points and important for a good sleep environment, sometimes we can get too caught up in making the perfect sleep environment. And that in itself can lead to more trigger thoughts. In metacognitive therapy, the reasons and the explanations of why we can't sleep is quite simple. It's the energy and the time that we spend fighting and struggling with our sleep. Let's look at some of the ineffective strategies from a metacognitive point of view and why these can sometimes help us fuel insomnia rather than help us go to sleep. One common strategy that's often used when you can't get to sleep is to try to suppress your thoughts. Unfortunately, suppressing our thoughts does not work, and it can lead to even more intrusive thoughts. We can think of it like a beach ball that we're trying to hold underwater. It'll only stay underwater as long as we hold on to it. The moment we let it go and we stop actively holding it down, it'll pop straight back to the surface, and sometimes splash us in the face even more forcefully than we could have anticipated. In a similar way, if we're telling ourselves to not think about something, we can be certain that that is the one thing we will think about. A commonly used example within explanations of metacognitive therapy is the pink elephant. Now, if I told you that for the next 10 seconds, you can think of anything but a pink elephant, I can guarantee you that if we did that for 10 seconds, the one thing you would have definitely thought of was a pink elephant. See, our mind can't not think about something. It's like us saying to our brain, "Dear brain, what do I need to remember to forget?" Our brain can't cope with that. It'll keep reminding us of the thing that we were actually trying to not think about. So the more we try to not think about something, the more the brain will keep reminding us of that thing. Trying to suppress a thought is hard work, just like holding a beach ball under the water is hard work. Instead, we'll do much better if we try to just leave the thought be and accept that they're there, but not deal with them. We'll talk much more about that a little bit later in the video. Another commonly used strategy is to monitor for fatigue and sleepiness during the day. This can lead to a biased attention and a misinterpretation of symptoms that are just normal and not actually caused by a lack of sleep. So if I was to ask you now, do you feel tired? Most of us would be able to feel, yeah, actually I do feel tired now that you mentioned it. We might not have noticed that we felt tired before we brought our attention to it. Feeling tired during the day is completely normal for everybody, even if we get enough sleep. But bringing our attention to it and making it a problem will make us think that it's caused by a lack of sleep. Another common strategy is to use sleep routine to try and promote sleep, like we saw Matthew do in many different ways in the example before. Now, the problem with this is that it can cause a preoccupation with sleep, and it can make us even more focused on that sleep that we need to get. Again, it's putting pressure on the sleep situation. It can also reinforce a belief that we can only possibly get to sleep if the conditions are just right, just how we've set them up at home. This can again lead us to missing out on social events, maybe not go on holiday or stay out anywhere, because we won't be able to recreate those exact conditions that we believe are necessary for us to sleep. Now, finally, using distractions or medication or any other sleep remedies may actually help us in the short run. But what it may do in the longer run is reinforce the belief that we are not able to control our rumination and our worry, and that we are relying on these medications and remedies to fall asleep. It can lead us to think that sleep doesn't come naturally. Now, all these strategies that I've just mentioned have one thing in common. They all try to fight against sleeplessness. Surprisingly, they often make the problem worse rather than helping. This is what I've seen time and time again with my clients. The strategies that they use to overcome insomnia actually end up backfiring and making the sleep even worse. So if all these strategies aren't helping us go to sleep, what can? Well, according to metacognitive therapy, the solution is simple. Fight less. To overcome insomnia, the first step is to stop using strategies to try to go to sleep. We need to do less to solve our sleep difficulties. By not fighting and actively trying to employ strategies all the time, we're giving our brain the best chances to actually go to sleep. When we're actively fighting to go to sleep and employing strategies to try and help us go to sleep, we're doing the complete opposite. We're keeping our brain active and alert. So by fighting less and letting go of the strategies, we can give our brain rest, and that will increase our chances of going to sleep. It can be really helpful to set ourselves an alternative goal when we go to bed. By letting go of the goal of falling asleep, we can take a lot of pressure out of the situation. So now you might think, of course the goal is to fall asleep. That's why I'm watching this video. That's similar to what I hear from my clients when they come to therapy to get help with their sleep difficulties. Sometimes at first I see frustration that I'm asking them to let go of the goal of falling asleep. But the goal I'm suggesting instead is to simply rest. So instead of being focused on falling asleep, we're focusing on resting. This means that we're not employing any strategies, we're not doing anything active, we're simply being resting. Now there are two big upsides to this. The first one is that by resting, we're giving our mind the best chance of actually letting us go to sleep. Now, even if we don't fall asleep, we still have the second upside to resting, which is that we will be less tired the next day than if we've spent the whole night fighting to go to sleep. If we imagine 2 nights where we're not getting a full night's sleep, but we on the first night struggle and fight and employ strategies the whole night to try and get to sleep, and we on the second night simply rest and relax our body and mind, we'll be significantly less tired after the second night than after the first. Now you might think, what about all those thoughts that I have? Surely they're not just going to go away because I'm just resting. And you'd be right, they probably won't go away. According to Metacognitive Therapy, they don't need to go away. We just simply need to not engage with them. In Metacognitive Therapy, we call this detached mindfulness, and it's very similar to normal mindfulness. What we want to do in detached mindfulness is accept that the thoughts are there, but not go into the content of them and getting entangled into solution. The nature of thoughts is that they tend to come and go unless we give them attention, unless we focus on them. And that's what can often happen on a night, that we latch onto a thought and we keep thinking it over and over again. By allowing the thoughts to be there and practicing detached mindfulness, we can rest in the fact that the thoughts are there, but we don't need to worry about them. One way of practicing detached mindfulness can be to imagine your thoughts as scenes being projected onto a movie screen. With detached mindfulness, you can take a step back and simply observe these scenes without getting overly caught up in or reactive to them. You become the mindful observer, fully aware of the scenes that are playing out on the screen, but without getting entangled in the content. When practicing detached mindfulness, the only goal is to avoid getting caught up in your thoughts. This can be important to remember so that detached mindfulness doesn't just become another coping strategy that could inadvertently perpetuate insomnia. Keep practicing observing and acknowledging and accepting your thoughts without getting caught up in them. If you keep practicing, you will get better at it and you will get a better night's sleep. Dealing with insomnia is like trying to free your finger from a Chinese finger trap. The more you struggle to change your thoughts or force yourself to go to sleep, the harder it becomes to sleep. So if you do struggle with insomnia and you feel like you've tried every single piece of advice out there, I encourage you to try this, even for a few nights, to see if it has any effect. I've got 3 main pieces of advice for you that sums up all the things we've talked about in this video. Number 1, let go of the goal of falling asleep. Instead, make it your goal to just relax. This will make you more likely to go to sleep, and if nothing else, it'll let you have a restful night and feel better the next day. Number 2, leave the trigger thoughts alone. Resist the urge to engage with the thoughts or try to handle or solve or fix anything. Delay all that for tomorrow if the thought is still relevant then. This is where practicing detached mindfulness can be a really helpful tool. And finally, number 3, carry on with your daily activities even if you feel tired. It's okay to feel tired, but we don't want that to be the focus of the day. Instead, we want to keep trying to focus on whatever it is we're actually doing on that day, and we'll feel so much better for it and get through the day. This way we're limiting the impact our lack of sleep has on our life, and therefore putting less pressure on the sleep situation, making us more likely to sleep. Now, I've seen in my daily work with clients that this really works, even though it feels counterintuitive. So if you've tried everything else and you've not seen any effect from it, you've got nothing to lose. Try it out and let me know in the comments if it helps you. I upload new psychological insights, tips and tools right here on this channel every single week, and I'd love for you to subscribe so we can meet again. Thank you for watching this one. Take care and bye for now.